Well, hello everyone. This is Joseph from PMR Reviews, and we have two very exciting products with us today. Just last September at E3 Germany, Sony announced the release of two new Xperia smartphones, and with me are the Xperia XZ and X Compact. Big thanks to Sony Mobile Singapore for the loan of these two smartphones along with the Xperia X. Coming in with a newly refined design and upgraded sensors in the camera, Sony attempts to provide strong competitions for other flagship phones with impressive camera as well. Now this design is what I like to call uniquely Sony, and it is very different from most smartphones out there. You see, most other smartphones have rounded edges to provide a more amiable vibe, and Sony phones generally do not conform to this more generic design. To be frank, I've never really liked this boxy rectangular design, but the implementation through the XZ and X Compact here is simply stunning as far as looks go. My main gripe about the original design is the ergonomics. Here in the Xperia X, the stiff edges aren't exactly the most comfortable thing to rest on your palms. But the loop design introduced here in these two phones, where the front glass panel and back cover are kind of curved and tapered in, makes it very comfortable to hold. The XZ and X Compact are two very good looking phones. The build, however, is not unibody. They have a plastic frame, along with their own backplate. The X Compact here has a high gloss plastic finish, while the XZ has a more premium alkylido metal finish. The XZ has a plastic component here at the bottom where the antenna bands reside. What is unique here in the design is that there are no screws visible from the outside. You see here in the iPhone, it has two screws, along with the One Plus, and just most other smartphones out there in general. Now what these two phones remind me of are the famous Japanese woodworking techniques. There are many temples in Japan that are centuries old that are made purely out of wood with not a single nail in them. The idea is not to force the wood upon each other, but rather to be gentle and respectful towards the materials that you have. The same idea here is replicated in the Xperia phones. Rather than locking the phone up with screws, the Sony engineers carefully pieced the individual segments together with proper and expert craftsmanship. Its rectangular look and flat base also gives a sense of rigidity and stability that is very much Japan. It's just so beautiful to look at it, and the design is outstanding. In terms of aesthetics and build quality, the XZ and X Compact are now easily one of my favorites, although the plastic frame here might not be as durable as metal. As for utility, the design is a bit of a mixed bag. The NFC, you can see the sticker here, is located at the front for the XZ, and it might be a bit awkward when using it. Sony has also been very insistent on the fingerprint scanner being on the power button on the right side of the phone. I don't like that the fingerprint scanner is on the lock button, because sometimes you want to look at the lock screen and it tells you that your fingerprint's not recognized, or that when you want to lock the phone, it unlocks just as you lock it. I would prefer Sony to have a separate location for the fingerprint scanner. Also, other than my right thumb, the only other finger I've registered with the fingerprint scanner is my left middle finger, because it kind of rests on it when I'm using it with my left hand, but the accuracy is not very good when I do this. However, the fingerprint scanner is quite reliable when using your right thumb. Now the volume buttons here perhaps raise the most eyebrows, but I think this is where Sony shows that there is a lot of focus for the camera. While not being very ergonomic when used as volume buttons, it doubles up as a very useful zoom or shutter speed control when in camera mode. Other than this, there's also the famous dedicated camera button, which is further proof of Sony's dedication to the camera. I do wish these phones use capacitive buttons because of the large chin and bezels here. However, in place of the capacitive buttons are dual stereo front-facing speakers, and they are such a joy to have. They don't go very loud at all, but they do sound quite good, better than most smartphone speakers, and plus it's fired towards you. The XZ here is rated IPX68 water and dust resistant, which is a huge bonus for me. But sadly, the X Compact here cannot boast of the same feature, which is a bit baffling to me perhaps, since the Z5 Compact was water resistant. Sony also never had a notification toggle button on their phones, and it is something that I wish they had. Overall, the design of the XZ and X Compact are simply beautiful, and I am glad that Sony paid such careful attention to the aesthetics. Some foibles here and there in terms of utility, but nothing really deal-breaking. As for the performance, both the XZ and X Compact performs admirably for their respective category of smartphones. Starting with the X Compact, it utilizes the Snapdragon 650 hexa-core processor. Now some might shake their head at this point. At an asking price of 648 Singapore dollars or $499 US, there are many smartphones out there offering more powerful SoCs than the Snapdragon 650. However, I believe Sony's main focus for these two smartphones is the camera. But in any case, the performance for the X Compact here is still very good for daily usage. App launchers when compared to its bigger brother is still snappy, and the delays are only more noticeable on larger apps. The XZ with a Snapdragon 820 has extremely commendable performance and presents itself as a strong opponent when compared to the other flagship smartphones. I like to use PC Mark and 3D Mark benchmark tools as it tests the real-world situations that the smartphones go through. After the NuGet update, the XZ completes the benchmarks with flying colors, pulling in with an overall score of 5534. You can see in the table here that the XZ is performing very closely to high-performance phones such as the OnePlus 3T, and the X Compact isn't falling too far behind. The optimizations done here by Sony is outstanding, with even the X Compact being very capable of strong performance. In the graphics benchmark app, it is noticeable here that this is the weakness of the X Compact, falling quite far behind from the high-end smartphones. When I tried playing more graphics-intensive games on the X Compact, such as Gangster 4, the graphics is noticeably toned down and it is not as smooth as when compared to the XZ. So definitely some compromises being made there with the X Compact, but other than playing big mobile games, it is very capable of doing everything else. Some of you may comment on the 3GB RAM, which might seem a bit outdated in this day and age, with even the OnePlus 3T here having 6GB RAM. But honestly, I have had no issues with app launch and multitasking here. Perhaps the OnePlus 3T may keep around apps longer in the background, but the XZ and X Compact works more than well enough. At times, you got to look past the hardware and look straight at the performance. The XZ has a 2900 mAh battery, while the X Compact has a 2700 mAh battery. Overall, the X Compact lasts longer because there are fewer pixels to power on the screen and can comfortably last through the day. The XZ, I find it towards the end of the day I'm looking for a charger. It would be nice to have a larger battery, but Sony includes their famous stamina modes, but I'll talk about that later in the operating system section. The eMMC storage here is something that I don't really like. I really prefer the superior UFS 2.0 storage used in many other flagship phones. However, launch times for these two phones are fast, with even the XZ not really losing out to the OnePlus 3T in app launch times. It just would be nice to guarantee the lifespan of the speed of a smartphone with a new storage technology. As for the display, Sony is proud to say that they have adapted technologies from their gorgeous Bravia display onto these two smartphones. The resolution for the XZ and X Compact are 1080p and 720p, with a 5.2-inch display and 4.6-inch display respectively. While they aren't the highest pixels per inch around, the screen is plenty crisp and I have no issues with either. Perhaps only in virtual reality usage would the resolution pose a problem, but other than that, they work very well. Anyways, Sony has implemented a lot of technology into making these two displays capable of very vibrant colors and high contrast ratios. In practice, I think the execution is quite well done. Colors are very bright and vivid. Brightness is of absolutely no problem for these two smartphones. Outdoor use is splendid and extremely usable under direct sunlight. Although the XZ here is capable of higher brightness than the X Compact, I do think Sony may have boosted the color saturation a bit. I wouldn't say the colors are accurate, but it certainly does look nice. For the operating system and user interface, I have updated to the Android Nougat version for the XZ. Sadly, the Nougat is not yet available for the X Compact, but it is still very encouraging to see Sony rolling out new updates very quickly. There is a lot of Google Apps integration. There are a few of the native applications and pre-installed apps such as Amazon, but it is not really a big deal. The default keyboard is SwiftKey, which I do use, but it is not hard to swap out for another keyboard. The overall UI is simple and straightforward. Very close to stock Android, and I mean this in an impartial manner. I know that there are some people who use how close an OS is to stock Android as a metric for how good the OS is. While I do see certain benefits to stock Android, I'm all for a company trying to implement their own idea of how a smartphone should serve its user. Now, Sony introduced a couple of features. There is smart backlight control, such that when it detects that you are still holding your phone and looking at the screen, the display will remain lit. There is also the battery care algorithm where the Xperia phones will be kept at 90% should you leave it charging overnight, and filling up to full only before you wake up, thus increasing the lifespan of the battery in the long run. However, there isn't really much else, and I do wish Sony added more features of their own. For example, the OnePlus 3T here allows you to trigger certain actions of the phone when you draw shapes on the display, such as the flashlight and things like that. Xiaomi also allows you to install two of the same applications within the same phone. I'm not saying Sony should copy the other companies, but it would be nice if they added extra attributes that can benefit the user. That being said, there is nothing wrong with the operating system, and it is able to fulfill the needs of many people. There are some aspects of the user interface that I feel could be improved. For the XZ, the minimum display and font size are still quite large. This really eats up a lot of screen space, and in a messaging app such as Telegram, it can even barely display 6 lines of text when you're using the keyboard. Even the iPhone 6 here can display more information, and it has a smaller screen. I feel this is extremely important because ultimately a smartphone screen is not large, and it would be able to cram more information if a phone's display can support it. Nougat's dual app display can also greatly benefit from this smaller font size. You see here, it feels kind of constrained, and there just isn't really much space to display information. It would also be appreciated if Sony would introduce night mode for the display so that it is easier on the eyes at night. One of the more annoying features is when you take out the SIM or micro SD card slot. When you do that, the phone will reboot. I'm not sure of the rationale behind this, and it is quite frustrating that it reboots whenever I want to swap out a micro SD card. And then a major aspect of the operating system is Sony's implementation of stamina mode. There are 3 levels of stamina mode that range from minimal restrictions of device performance to making the whole phone feel sluggish and honestly even hard to use. Although there are times when I remember thinking I would just take drastic measures to squeeze out more battery time, and hey, Sony does give you the option to do that. Although for general purpose, if you do go out, I recommend the first level of stamina mode, which is a good compromise between performance and battery life, and I can usually last a good chunk of the day with that. Now the camera. We've finally arrived here. Sony has some of the best hardware available for smartphone cameras right here, and compared to the older model, the new model has the new RGB-C color sensor and laser autofocus for nighttime use. The fact that Sony included a mighty camera onto the X Compact only goes to show that the true intended focus for the X Compact is ultimately the camera, and it certainly has one of the best cameras around. One thing to note, the X Compact cannot film 4K videos, and I think this is due to the weaker graphics capabilities as seen in the performance section. In any case, we need to start off with the essentials. Launch times of the camera is fast, not the fastest when you launch it from the home screen, but it is still very fast. Plus, the dedicated camera button makes it very easy for you to launch the camera and snap a picture. The UI is simple and quite easy to get used to. The built-in manual mode is also very easy to navigate through. The time it takes to take a picture generally isn't very fast, but I think that's Sony image processing happening in the background. In any case, let's get started already. Here in this image, you can see the color saturation is really amazing. The colors are a little bit oversaturated, but it still looks really nice and just brings out the beautiful purple color. Both the XZ and X Compact perform very well here, with beautiful vivid colors. This next picture here is some of houses around the compound that I live in, and the Xperia phones did a fantastic job. The colors are vibrant and the XZ was able to bring out a very bright image. Detailing throughout the image is quite good. However, I have to point out that the details around the edges are not as good as the center. You can see around here in the leaves that it is not as clear. The X Compact also took a very nice picture, however the processing capabilities of the Snapdragon 650 cannot compete with the Snapdragon 820, and as a result, detail retrieval in the photos taken by the X Compact generally is weaker than the XZ. The 23 megapixel here on these two smartphones, which Sony touts, allows better detailing throughout the photo from these two phones and a larger picture overall. However, down at the pixel level, it is not very good. So if you try to zoom in on the photos, it will look quite grainy. In this night shot outside here in my home, the XZ and X Compact shows off its nighttime prowess, completely outshining the iPhone 6s. The Xperia phones achieve good low light performance through the ultra-high 12800 ISO option. The problem with having high light sensitivity is an increase in noise throughout the photo. So it all boils down to how Sony's imaging software performs noise reduction, and the result is good. Smartphones typically have bad low light performance, and the XZ and X Compact perform very well. Sony has done well in reducing the noise, and I think the overall compromise is very decent and is able to provide a nice picture. If I want to compare these two phones to some of the best smartphone cameras out there, such as the Google Pixel and Huawei Mate 9, would I say that they are better? Well, I don't think they are better, but it is hard to generalize hardware and capabilities with such a statement. The detail retrieval, especially in the case of the XZ, is very good, comparable to the Huawei Mate 9, which has a dedicated black and white camera just for detail retrieval. The Google Pixel has HDR perpetually on, leading to very good contrast control, which aren't the strong suits of the Xperia phones. However, it honestly boils down to what you want in a camera. In general, I find that the Sony phones try to vivify the images, and if I may say so myself, more vivid than in real life. You can see in the picture here versus the Huawei Mate 9, while the Huawei brings out a deeper yellow in the flower, the overall greenery and image taken by the XZ is more lush and seemingly more picturesque. Accurate? Not really. Does it look nice? I would say so. I think more or less we can see the direction that Sony is headed with these two cameras. If you're a casual user who uses Instagram and Facebook and the like, the camera on the XZ is your best bet right now for taking those seemingly glamorous pictures. I mean, hey, I enjoyed using this camera. All the foot pictures I took looked great. Both these phones do not have optical image stabilization, but instead has digital image stabilization. Standard 1080p video utilizes 3-axis image stabilization, and only macro videos have the 5-axis image stabilization. Nevertheless, it works quite well. A good thing about digital image stabilization is that it can be used for both front and rear cameras, so those selfie videos will also look more stable. Sony's image software processing tends to brighten up the image and videos, and in many cases, this is a good thing, although there are some times when it looks a bit unnatural. However, you can easily tone down the brightness and find the right amount of exposure. While the main rear camera on both smartphones are quite similar, the X Compact's front camera is a step down from its bigger brother, and it just isn't as sharp. That being said, both works quite well, and the X Compact again, a bit less detail, but still a very decent selfie camera. Amongst other things, after covering the major aspects of the phones, there are always minor things that should be mentioned. Sony touts a high-res audio headphone output, and I've been listening to it with my handy Audio-Technica IM02, which are very easy to drive. The output sounds clear and detailed for sure, but whether it is a definite step up from the iPhone's output, which is frankly quite good, I am unable to say for certain. These two phones are also capable of quick charge, but Sony does not include quick chargers in the packaging, so that's a bit of a bummer there. Now for the conclusion. Sony certainly puts forth a very unique approach towards the design of these two smartphones. I love the aesthetics of the smartphones and how much they remind me of Japan. The elegance and beauty is just unparalleled. Front-facing speaker, waterproofing in the case of the XZ, and micro SD card slots are all a joy to have. Perhaps the volume buttons and fingerprint scanner location takes a bit of getting used to. The UI is a bit plain for my taste, but it works very well. The XZ's device performance is outstanding. The X Compact, on the other hand, has a bit weaker graphics capabilities, but overall still a very capable phone. The camera on these two phones, as expected, is very good and takes beautiful pictures. It's just overall, the XZ and X Compact, the difference with the Xperia X and X Performance is minimal. The X Compact and Xperia X both use the Snapdragon 650, while the XZ and X Performance both use the Snapdragon 820. I think the X Compact and XZ here aren't released to replace these older phones, but rather to provide an updated physical design, which looks very nice and different dimension, with the XZ being an overall larger phone and the X Compact being the smaller alternative. The X Compact here is perhaps not the most straightforward as a device, but nonetheless, if small phones are your thing, yet don't want to compromise on the camera, this puts up a very strong fight. If you're out there looking for a flagship smartphones, the XZ puts up a compelling argument. It is well-rounded with plenty of good hardware features such as waterproofing, strong device performance, and just a beautiful design. Just look at this phone, and it has no camera hump. Overall, beautiful phones, and excellent job by Sony here. I hope you all enjoyed this review, and this is Joseph, signing out.